Welcome back to the Employee Wellbeing Service Introduction to Assertiveness workshop. This is part 2, where we will be exploring what assertiveness is and how to develop it within ourselves. So, now we've thought about the non-assertive ways in which we may be behaving, let's move on to assertive behaviour. What comes to mind when you think of assertive behaviour? I'll give you a moment to think about this. Again, you may wish to pause the video and write down some of your ideas. Now you've had a think, here are some examples of assertiveness. I can say no when I want to. What I want matters. I can make decisions about the things in my life which I have control over. Assertiveness is essential to self-esteem and vice versa, and it's a way of responding that can be learned. And what we want to learn is to respond rather than react. So have a conscious awareness rather than mindless rebelliousness, which you might see in more passive-aggressive or aggressive behaviour. And just as with passivity and aggression, assertiveness is expressed through our body language, how we communicate, behave and think. To state this more formally, here are some definitions from Nathaniel Branden's 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. Assertiveness means honouring your wants, needs and values, and seeking appropriate forms of their expression in reality. Context is important here. You can act authentically in work and when playing with your kids or out with your friends, but this will look different according to the situation. Brandon also provides a definition of self-esteem. As self-esteem is so interrelated with assertiveness, it's helpful to understand what self-esteem looks like. Self-esteem is the confidence in our ability to think and to cope with the basic challenges of life, and the confidence in our right to be successful and happy, entitled to assert our needs, wants, achieve our values, and enjoy the fruit of our efforts. Self-esteem and assertiveness are related in that actions that support self-esteem can improve assertiveness, and assertiveness can boost your self-esteem. For example, if you feel confident in your abilities, you may be more likely to assert your thoughts about them. Behaving assertively, in turn, can improve your self-esteem as it reinforces the idea that you have a right to be successful and happy and cope with life's challenges. We are all born assertive. Young children spend half their time saying no and protesting. So what have we learned over time that has hindered this? Why might it be difficult to behave assertively? You might be afraid to rock the boat. Saying no could cause changes in relationships dynamics that can be painful if you're no longer going along with things just because you feel you have to. You might fear alienation, resentment, or even jealousy from others as you start to just change the behaviour. You might hold unhelpful beliefs about being assertive. For example, you might think it's rude or uncaring to say what you need. You might believe that you shouldn't have to say what you need and that people should just know, or that you should keep your feelings to yourself. These are all beliefs that might have been reinforced in childhood. Now let's think about the benefits of being assertive. Your self-esteem is likely to improve. You will be more likely to get what you want out of life, but this isn't a given. It's important to keep in mind that being assertive doesn't mean you'll just get what you want. The important part is that you've said your piece and allowed others to as well. You may feel less resentment. Being less driven by self-consciousness and self-protection can help you to interact with the world, including the people in your life, more authentically. Now let's think about some different techniques to develop your assertiveness. Let's start with the broken record technique. This is a helpful way to make sure you get your point across assertively. It can be used in a wide range of contexts. Stick to your point and repeat it over and over. Keep it simple, remain calm and firm. Listen to the other person's point of view, but return your own until you feel heard. Maintain open body language, a steady tone of voice, remaining not too quiet, loud, or high-pitched. Let's think of an example. You've bought an item of clothing and realised it's damaged when you try it on at home. You go back and tell the store assistant, "I bought this item yesterday, it's damaged and I'd like a refund." The store assistant isn't very helpful and says, "I'm not sure I can help, I wasn't here yesterday." Then you can say, "I understand you weren't serving here yesterday, but I do want a refund as this item is damaged." The assistant might say something like, "It's not really my role, I don't think I can help you." You can just continue to say, "The point is that the item is damaged and I want a refund." You don't need to say anything to justify yourself or make excuses, or falsely agree with the other person. Now let's think about saying no. As we mentioned just now, children say no and protest regularly. However, over time, those unhelpful beliefs about being assertive develop, and we can lose this skill. However, we can relearn this ability. Here are some tips. Think before you respond, so don't just react. And if you're not sure, ask for time to think. Be straightforward and brief and polite. You might like to say, "Thank you for asking, but I can't do that." Speak slowly with warmth, and don't apologise or give elaborate reasons. You don't need to justify yourself. And take responsibility when saying no. Don't blame or make excuses. Here's an example. You're asked by your manager to work late at short notice. You already have important plans, and you say, "I'm not going to be able to work late this evening." And your manager might press you, "But 2 staff have gone off sick and we need to get these letters out." You'd have to say, "I understand that the team is under a lot of pressure, but tonight I can't work late." They would say, "But we might fall behind on booking in clients." And you can say, "Regardless, I won't be able to work late this evening. I'd be happy to talk about my shift pattern at a later point, but this evening I won't be able to work late." An important thing to remember is that assertiveness is not just about saying no. It's important to think about what you actually stand for. What are your values? How do these values influence your behaviour? It's not enough to simply hold values, you need to behave accordingly as well. It can be detrimental to self-esteem to act against your values, and can boost your self-esteem to act in line with them. So behaving authentically and behaving in accordance with your values can improve your self-esteem. Pause the video and take some time to think about the values that you hold. You can use these as a jumping off point or just come up with your own. Having a better sense of the values that you hold can help you evaluate how your behaviour fits with them and the points that it's important to you to be assertive about. It's important to note that our assertiveness might present differently around different people. For example, at work we may feel assertive, able to ask for what we need and say how we feel, whilst we might not feel like that with our partners or friends, or vice versa. Sometimes we can end up in difficult interpersonal dynamics, which can be thought of in terms of the parent-child-adult triad, and this can have a big influence on our assertiveness. People take on different roles in different dynamics. Some people take on the parental role in their adult relationships. This can present as being critical or nurturing and displaying behaviours such as coming to people's aid, taking responsibility for other people's feelings, becoming resentful, rescuing, for example doing things for people that they can do themselves, taking on other people's problems as if they were own, or becoming controlling. This sort of dynamic can indicate that you're lacking boundaries around what you will tolerate from others, and it can enable the child in the relationship. Let's look at the role of the child. The child is one that looks to others to sort things out, believes that other people know better, waits for orders, goes against their intuition, and feels more comfortable being told what to do. They might be perceiving authority figures as parental figures. This parent-child dynamic amongst adults isn't ideal and can lead to a lack of accountability, build-up of resentment, and nobody getting what they need, often through a lack of self-assertiveness, which can come from a place of low self-esteem. Let's think about how this triad might play out in a work setting. As the parent, you might start taking on other people's roles, becoming controlling, offering to do more than you can, and criticising people who don't match your standards. The children in that dynamic, then, are enabled to not be accountable for their own behaviour and their role. Now let's think about a different example focusing on the role of the child, this time in the home. Let's think about a housemate who's not taking responsibility for their chores, while having issues with the way the household is run and feeling that they could contribute, but other housemates begin taking up the slack and the housemate leaves it to them. Understandably, this can lead to a lot of hurt and frustration. Instead, what we want is to be coming from the third position in the triad, that of the adult. Being an adult means taking responsibility and accountability for our actions. What we want to see is two adults coming together who recognise that they're responsible for their own actions and not anyone else's. You're responsible for your own life, and so is everyone else. You're an adult, and they are an adult. Recognising this can help you to develop boundaries. You might have a better idea of what you will and won't accept, and can see that you aren't responsible for other people's behaviours or feelings, and you might start to take more accountability for your own behaviour. More self-esteem often means more boundaries and allows you to attune to yourself and your needs. This doesn't mean you're no longer caring or shut off. In fact, having boundaries reduces the chance that you will become burnt out and resentful. Keeping your role as an adult in situations can help you to develop your assertiveness. We're now going to go through a sentence completion task. This is an opportunity to reflect on what we've learned today and to help you going forward. Complete each sentence. Don't think too hard, just write what comes naturally. It's more helpful to write the first thing that comes to your head. Answer as quickly as possible. Don't worry if an ending is true or as accurate as you want it to be. Any ending is fine, just keep going. It might be a good idea to pause the video for a few minutes while you complete this activity. Assertiveness is an active process. You can't read or learn theory and expect to be assertive. It's something you need to learn to be. So let's explore some ways to practice assertiveness going forward. The following can all be found in the Centre for Clinical Intervention's Assertiveness Workbook. Let's start with thought diaries. Challenging unassertive thinking is a really important step in becoming more assertive. It can be difficult to challenge your assertive thoughts in your head, however. Instead, it can be helpful to write them down using a thought diary. This involves identifying your thoughts and understanding your reaction to them. The second step is to dispute or challenge your unassertive thoughts. Continue to use a thought diary for these situations until it becomes a default reaction to challenge your unassertive thoughts. You will then find that you can notice your unassertive thoughts before you act on them and dispute them in your head. Assertiveness hierarchy. Identify a list of things that would require assertiveness that you need to do. For example, asking your housemate to be tidier, saying no to a project your boss gives you that you don't have time for. Then rank and rate how difficult this would be and work your way through them, from easiest to most difficult. And finally, behaviour experiments can be a really helpful way to test your unassertive thoughts out in the real world. First, you identify your prediction. For example, if I ask my housemate to contribute more, they will hate me. Then, identify your unhelpful behaviours. I avoid talking to her about it, act annoyed in the hopes they'll know why I'm upset. Then, you identify a more realistic prediction, such as, my friend has asked me to change my behaviours in the past and I didn't hate her for it. Then identify your helpful behaviours and set up your experiment. For example, I will arrange to have a chat and ask her nicely to help more around the house. Then you carry out the experiment and evaluate the results, which were that the housemate said they hadn't realised and they would try to do more around the house. You can find all these activities, including the broken record technique and saying no, in the Assertiveness workbook by the Centre for Clinical Interventions, which is freely available online. If you would like to develop your assertiveness, we would advise working through these workbooks. And finally, practice, practice, practice. As I hope you have seen throughout this presentation, assertiveness is a skill that can be developed, and practicing the relevant skills is key. Thank you for watching this Employee Wellbeing Service presentation.